right. I would like to call to order a special meeting. This is a public hearing for proposed amendments to zoning bylaws. And Pip Bannister is going to walk us through this.
Thank you, Josh. I'm wondering if any of the attendees are here to speak about the bylaw and subdivision amendments. Mike or Robin or Tom Goddard? No? Okay. Then Josh, I'm not really speaking to anybody, I think, except the select board, which is not uncommon. The Planning Commission public hearing had no members of the public in attendance.
Right.
Peter's here to answer any questions about the neighborhood development area, which is one of the drivers behind this cycle of bylaw amendments. And 3 of the amendments here were done specifically to further the goals of the neighborhood development area approval. This is a unique process that an applicant can go through, and in this case, the applicant would be the Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust.
This conference will now be recorded.
And
Sorry about that.
It's okay. I think I sent you links to the neighborhood development area designation. You know, if any of you are interested in following it up, Peter can talk a little bit more about it if you have questions. But that was what was behind 3 of these changes. They were also changes that were not inconsistent with our development goals in town, not inconsistent with the town plan. We're just, typically taking a little bit more of a regulatory approach to development within the village, which is where the neighborhood development area would be located. And so in that case, I don't think any of them are significantly controversial. There is a reduction of the minimum lot area from 15,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet for lots served by municipal water and sewer. That would only be for lots that, you know, were big enough to handle that type of development. But those levels of density are what the state is expecting to see in the neighborhood development area, and is consistent with most of the recommendations that I've seen from the guides about trying to promote appropriate densities in village centers, that type of stuff. And the smaller lot size concept is to create a walkable neighborhood. It's consistent with the densities that most of us are familiar with from sort of small town walkable sidewalk, porch house, you know, driveway, that type of stuff. There are a couple others that were housekeeping and were on the sort of to-do list, so that the next time an opportunity came to bundle them all together, that's what has happened here. So we have some clarification about the PRD, PUD, PED regs. We had the benefit of some legal review for a permit that was issued by the DRB that was then appealed, and during that process, the town attorney took a good look at our regs and noted some shortcomings in them. And so this is an opportunity to just clean up language that was inconsistent, other things, and also to establish a concept about major changes in an existing permit, and sort of establish a threshold after which further review would be required to change the permit. And under that threshold, the zoning administrator could deal with the modifications. And the zoning administrator can make a judgment call as to whether or not it's significant enough to be kicked up to further review. And so we didn't have a good process in general for how to deal with changes in permits. It was a little bit hit or miss. So I think that was a great outcome of the review of the PRD application that we had appealed, is some of this cleaning up of these other matters. And for a long time, the last one here is our subdivision regs have required the Development Review Board to meet to consider approval for lot line adjustments between two parties. You and your neighbor want to change the lot line. You're not creating any new lots. It's for whatever purposes, you thought it would be of benefit to both of you. And they're not controversial. Both parties are coming to us and requesting this. It's time consuming, and they have yet to have any issues that would be significant. So this allows the zoning administrator, for that unique case of a lot line adjustment that doesn't increase the number of lots, doesn't create any nonconformities, doesn't violate any permits. I mean, there's a whole list of things here, checklists, that then allow the zoning administrator to just approve them. And if the zoning administrator feels there's any reason to kick it back to the Development Review Board, that's an option that they can do. And so it's just administrative, frees up the Development Review Board. We've met at times just simply to do one of those, and it's unnecessary, I think. Do you guys have any questions about the general concepts? And if you'd like to hear from Peter, he can talk about the process for the neighborhood development area, which is actually generated by an applicant and doesn't come from the town. It's an interesting way the state is approaching it. So if you want to hear from Peter.
I have a couple questions first, if that's all right. First, just sort of work backwards, Pip. The lot line adjustment proposal, that's not limited to the village. Is that correct? That would be lot line adjustments anywhere within the town. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not really, I mean, it might apply in some cases to density questions, but not so much. And my assumption
I'm sorry, blending these two things together. The items 1, 2, 3, and 4 are related to the neighborhood development area. The rest are scattershot changes, and they will affect all aspects of the bylaws and the subdivision.
Okay, thank you. My guess is, based on the change from 15,000 to 10,000, that would be largely related to new development more than, I mean, I'm picturing on Kimball Hill, for example, there's the empty lot above the place that Jerry Hyam owns. That I'm guessing already, I think there was a house there previously, and that already fell into, I guess what I'm trying to get a sense of is, we're not trying to pack a whole bunch more houses into the houses that already exist. We're trying to allow for more density in the areas that are not yet developed. Is that largely true or not?
Yes, with the exception that the municipal planning grant driven studies of the village have shown that there's very little developable land, but
right.
There are lots that are sized big enough to have met the existing zoning's minimum lot size and could theoretically be subdivided, or could have a legal second and accessory dwelling placed on them. So there is a goal to do some infill, and this decrease to 10,000 square feet for a lot with sewer and water might enable a few more lots to sort of get the house behind, which is a model that you see it in Brattleboro, especially. You'll see that there's a second house and the driveway often extends back to it.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of that either. I mean, there's a pretty thorough study that was done about 10 years ago. There's just not a whole lot of land to build in the current configuration of the village, but this would this would allow for some of that infill.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Anybody else? Questions for Peter? One item that did come up was if we do get a neighborhood development area designation, it gives us preferential treatment for a number of grants. And I thought this was a pretty good carrot, is that municipal planning grants, bike ped, transportation alternative grants, property assessment funding, community development block grants, wastewater funding, and affordable housing funds are preferentially given to communities that have this designation. So we already have a village center designation. It's one of the types of designation, and this would be a secondary one. The exact borders of it, I think Peter would be working out with the state. It kind of overlapped with the village zoning district, but it didn't meet every requirement, so it may be tweaked a little bit. But in general, I think it's going to conform. It won't be outside the village, and it may be a portion of the village that is assigned the neighborhood development area. But I love that the town would get preferential treatment for a number of these grants, because we've chased them in the past. And we've been lucky in receiving municipal planning grants, but it would be great. We have been turned down for 2 of them that I recall. Just, wasn't a project that looked that appealing, and the funding was limited. So it'd be great if we could get a little step up. So that was just another additional plus.
And is that one of your motivations, Peter, for having proposed this, was to increase access to funding, or?
Our biggest motivation is that with the neighborhood development area, developments that we or others could develop would potentially fall into the priority housing designation, which is a provision in the Act 250 legislation that allows for developments that have, I believe it's 20% of the units being affordable, and the definition of affordable is in the Act 250 legislation. They are exempt from the Act 250 permitting process. So for us, it's a time saver. It saves money. So that was our big take on why the NDA would be a benefit to our developments. And then, as Pip said, the benefits to the town would be access to grants. It does make our funding a little bit more competitive. Nothing that we would pursue, traditionally nothing that we would pursue requires an NDA, but it does, they do prioritize these smart growth areas. So it would certainly make our projects more competitive.
And is this specifically related to the Putney Gateways area, or not? And full disclosure, I'm a partial owner of Putney Gateways, so I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering whether that was some of the motivation.
That was the motivation. I will say this wasn't on our radar when we were first approached about the property and development opportunity there. And it just in the course of development, it kind of got on our radar and thought it'd be worthwhile for something to pursue. So it's not as if that development depends on this designation. It would just make it all the better. But it was that was the main driver in us taking a look at this.
Given that that's the case and that I am a partial owner, I think I will recuse myself from voting on this. Or at least any portions, Pip, that you think it would be appropriate for. I mean, we're really you would be looking for a vote to approve the entire sort of package. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I will say that our plans currently meet existing zoning, so there's nothing in the in our development plans that would benefit from the zoning changes, just the NDA designation, which requires some of these zoning changes.
Yeah, that may not have been clear, is that to meet the NDA requirements, there's a long checklist, and it's very explicit, like the minimum lot size, minimum setback, or maximum setback from the street. So I went through the checklist with Peter, and we looked at those specific items that were most attainable under Putney zoning with just a little tweak or a section of a change that I thought would be beneficial in general and maybe had been talked about. We just never included it in the zoning. So we're meeting specific guidelines for the NDA program with items 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's was among the driving motives for doing those changes. I think they're all beneficial changes, and I think having the NDA designation will also be beneficial.
So we're at just past 5:30 now. Do people have any further questions or comments? There, let's see. One thing in the chat, is that related? No comment.
Robin.
Okay, Robin's saying he has no comment other than to state that he supports them. So does somebody want to make a motion to approve the recommendation for put the right language, propose the recommended or the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw and subdivision regulations?
So moved.
I'll second.
Right. So it has been moved and seconded to approve the proposed amendments and to the zoning bylaw and subdivision regulation. Are there any further questions or comments? And if I have a question, is this, are we the final body in approving this, or does this go somewhere else from here? We're the final body.
It stops with the select board.
Okay, sounds good. So are there any further questions or comments?
I have a question, and that is that the study that you talked about, Pip, that looked into how many more lots are possible to build on or add to in Putney that was done, in that study, did it have any projection on the effect it would have on our wastewater system and on our water system, supplying those places? And if you're adding the number of units that you're considering to add, Peter, down there, do we have any idea what kind of effect that would have on us? I know that it's one of those systems is aging, and we're going to have to be doing some work to that pretty soon. We were thinking we might have to, and I didn't know if that was that had crossed our minds in this process. So.
Well, I will say from our perspective, we would, for any development, obviously we would have to go through the water wastewater permitting process, which would require an allocation from the town. So I think any concerns would come up during that process, but obviously I would leave it to somebody else at the town to talk about capacity.
Karen, we've had this conversation about the capacity at the treatment plant. Maybe you could share some of that.
So in talking with our contractor, so residential is allowable, and we are nearing capacity, but with more compact settlement, we would probably have to look at, possible upgrades down the road. So right now, what I was told like a year and a half ago is we have like 80 units available for residential, but we have to consider commercial too, because we can't say no to commercial. But as far as commercial coming in, and most likely too, a large housing project, I would talk to our contractor and have him in the loop. But David, you're right. Down the road, we're going to be looking at, near capacity with the system, because it is aging. Possibly with stimulus money and federal dollars, we might, start planning on, extending and, putting money into that treatment plant that we have now. You know, and also, I know with Putney Landing, Peter, and you can speak to this, there were upgrades to that pump station on Old Depot Road because of the Putney Landing project, which is a benefit to the town. So, you know, as we look at housing projects, we also look at capacity for the pump stations and the treatment plant as a whole.
So, if we reduce the minimum lot size requirement, how many, maybe you can answer this, how many new lots are possible in this town in the village, in that study? So how many residentials would we possibly adding to the system?
I don't know. You'd have to do a theoretical build out.
Right.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's going to have significant impact. We just haven't seen that development pressure, you know, in the last 30 years. But it just some information. The last quantitative data I have about the waste treatment facility was from the 2015 town plan. It was information provided before that, but at that point, it had an 80,000 gallon per day capacity. Karen, I don't know whether that's still accurate, but at that time, it was treating 52,000 gallons per day. You know, so that gave a balance. I mean, you do the math. 8 and 28,000. So it was probably at about 3/4, you know, 60% capacity.
Mm-hmm.
We have in the past acknowledged that, gotten monies, done feasibility studies, you know, gotten the upgrades. There have been 2 of them, I think, cycles of that, Josh, since I've been around. And, you know, I think, need to just take a look at it, look at its capacity, current capacity, and see what that difference is. And if it's getting close, it's time, you know, it's time to get some money, get a feasibility study,
Right.
begin to think about what needs to be done.
But you don't feel like that is a deterrent from reducing the lot size. That's something that's doable. And
My sense.
I mean, I'm not a waste treatment engineer, but I don't think this change of 5,000 square foot reduction in the minimum lot size is going to result in a flood of residential development that will not be able to be met by the waste treatment facility. I just don't think you're going to see anything like that. In fact, I doubt you're going to see anything more than the development that the housing providers are involved with, like Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust. You know, you just see the incremental one house here, one house there.
Thank you.
I think, David, based on that study that was done a number of years ago, correct me if I'm wrong in my recollection of this, Pip, but there were a few significant areas that were areas that could be really developed and really change sort of the nature of the size of the village. One of those was above the top of West Street, you know, Stromberg, all the way around, sort of circling around to the back of what was Robert Olson's place. And then another one, you know, over at the Putney Inn, there's a chunk of land over there behind the Putney Inn that could be densely developed, as well as, you know, where Chad Farnham and King Builders, et cetera, you know, there's room for more over there, and that's a whole different leg. And then the one other place I think was up along River Road, Pip, and those were the ones where I would imagine you might see a big enough increase if somebody were to purchase that and really want to do a development, quote unquote, then you would really see something that would potentially shift our wastewater needs. But infill in the village beyond that, I think we largely probably have capacity for.
I agree, given the development trends that we've seen. I don't think that the residential development is going to be the driver of waste treatment facility changes. I do think a commercial development could. You know, they've always had issues with the grease and other elements coming from restaurants, that type of stuff, which are much more challenging to deal with for the waste treatment facility. But I don't think we should spend too much time on this. Just, I feel confident that the zoning change that just got approved isn't going to have a major impact on the waste treatment facility. But I do think it's something that we should be thinking about, and especially talking to about what capacity changes occurred since this town plan information was taken in 2015. And if it's starting to look worse, then definitely we need to start chasing the money for a feasibility study.
The other thing we did last time when we did a significant upgrade, David, was we added equipment that dramatically improved the efficiency of our existing plan. And so, whether there are more things we could do related to that, I'm not sure, but a feasibility study would probably be a good way to go. So if there aren't any further questions, it's been moved and approved the,
I have a question.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir, Mr. Fairman.
something that has not been mentioned, I'm going to take us back now to the 2029 Putney Town Meeting, where Principal Pelletier told us that Putney Central School's enrollment is increasing, which is unusual in Vermont, because of the 12 new townhouses that Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust built at Putney Landing. And because I live there, I can tell you that there's more kids to come because I see them in the playground every day. Now, two kinds of housing have been mentioned here. One is the kind that developers such as Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust do, which is affordable housing. And in the case of homes like the townhouses here at Putney Landing, this is attractive to young families who bring the kids or will produce the kids that will enable Putney Central School to thrive. So that is another aspect of this that we should keep in mind. Versus one house built on a lot here, one house built on a lot there, which is apt to be a more established family who can obtain and afford a mortgage. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Vanessa has a question.
Great.
Hi. I was trying to find in the agenda the specifics of what area you're talking about. Is this by any chance the land where the community garden is located?
There is development, proposed potential development that may go into that area, but I believe Peter could speak to this. I believe there has been some agreement with the community garden folks about how that might be managed. Peter?
Yes, so we've been working with Green Commons of Vermont, which was the nonprofit formed by the farmers market and the community gardens, on our development plans, on their development plans, and the plan is to sell a portion of that lot that's bound by Alice Hallway Drive, Carroll Brown, and Route 5 to Green Commons for further development, for expanding the farmers market and keeping the community gardens. They have their own plans that we've been talking about, but I'm not sure what their particular plans are. But the plan is to sell a portion of the lot to them to retain those two uses.
So question remains, where are you talking about? You're changing the zoning laws for what purpose? Where?
The zoning law change is, each one is, if you read the changes, it's specific to zoning districts, like primarily the village zoning districts for the increase in density.
So it affects.
Can I suggest that this idea of going on, previous development is really dangerous, that with an increase to over $1.3 billion in out-of-state home sales in just this past year, that nothing is going to be as it was. And the idea that decreasing lot sizes is okay just because it has been in the past. I think is a potentially really dangerous idea to base these changes on.
It's only within the village, Vanessa.
Mhm. Well, but I mean, like even, that area across from the co-op, as it is, like the town is going to be more or less, destroyed if that goes away. It's the only green space. It's the entry to the town, that entire thing could just be how many units?
So there's a motion on the floor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I think there'll be public hearings, Vanessa,
Yeah.
regarding any development. And that may be the time to bring these concerns back in front of the.
Okay. Well, question on that though. My understanding was that somewhere along the line, there was I don't know, legislation, for lack of a better term, passed that said that once, and I think it was done for WWHT, that once a builder had gotten permission to do one development, that they no longer had to go back to the town for permission for future developments. So that even if there are public hearings, that anything can happen in that lot without any input from, or any effective input from the town.
That's not true. They still have to go through the zoning process, and they have to do state permitting as well. So there'll be more than one public hearing if it moves forward.
And I think I heard Peter say, and again, I want to just sort of keep myself at an arm's distance from this discussion, but I think I heard Peter say that this would not change the lot size proposals for what they're currently thinking. Is that correct, Peter?
That's correct. What we're currently thinking would fit into the existing zoning.
Right.
The zoning changes would really be just for this neighborhood development area, which again benefits the town as well. So
The problem with changing zoning laws based on current thinking is obviously really dangerous. And you make this change today, and tomorrow WWHT decides that in fact they're going to develop that entire area, and there goes the only open green space in town.
Well, the preservation of that green space is an issue entirely separate from the lot size or development potential of that area. And Vanessa, I'd be glad to talk about this with you at our next planning commission meeting. But I think you're sort of you're bringing two issues together. I'm not sure they're related.
Are you not about to change a zoning law that would affect that plot?
The zoning, it's a developable lot, whether it's at 15,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. And if a developer chose to develop that lot, it could be developed. There's nothing in the zoning, current zoning, that prevents that. The reduction in the lot size here, I don't think there's going to be, the changes we've seen proposed so far by Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust aren't going to be affected by this change. Other lots in the village may be, but there aren't very many lots that are developable. And the reduction from 15,000 to 10,000, I don't think is going to have a significant impact. So it doesn't really have anything to do with whether or not the garden is retained. Do you get that?
I think there's some dangerous assumptions being made, but yeah.
Eileen, you had a hand up?
Yeah, I think Pip probably adequately explained it. I just wanted to reiterate that the village district already had the required recs for this project to go through. This particular change is just clarifying certain things to be able to get the NDA designation, which among other things allows the town to get funding for grants. The village district was the zoning for the village district was created specifically to for density purposes, to make it more walkable and bikeable and reduce transportation. That's how the town plan reads right now. So this is just following that to its logical conclusion.
And I would also just say, if you'd like to reach out to the folks at Green Commons to talk about, what our conversations have been with them and what their plans are for expanding the farmers market and retaining the gardens too.
And you don't, Peter, have an intention, if this gets changed, to change the proposed development that potentially would go in that area, is that correct?
No, what we're looking at is kind of at the limit of what we would like to do anyway. I don't think we would really have the capacity to go much bigger regardless, in terms of number of units. So
Remind me how many units?
we're proposing 24.
Okay. Right.
All right.
And again,
so,
that hasn't been permitted or anything yet. That's our thinking right now. So
Thank you. Yeah.
it's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed changes to bylaws as presented. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain from the vote. And that, I believe, brings to a close this public hearing. And thank you all for participating. And we will now move on to, actually, we're going to move on to Liquor Commission quickly. And we are running behind schedule, so I'm going to try and keep things moving pretty quickly. So thanks, Peter. See ya. So this is a application for renewal of a license for Next Stage Arts. And is John with us, Karen?
I am here. I'm having
Okay.
problems with my camera. Everybody's frozen on my screen and I'm not active. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a renewal of the Next Stage beer and wine license. They also have an outdoor consumption permit. Those are both renewals. They weren't included in the first set because all of the businesses all the permit holders except Next Stage renewed in the middle of the COVID pandemic when we had the shutdown last spring. Next Stage knew that they weren't going to be doing anything, so they did not. So when the state sent us the renewal forms, technically Next Stage wasn't an active permit. So we had to secure the forms and you have them. Time is a little bit of the essence. So I have sent to Alyssa the signature forms, but I want to try to get this on the way to Montpelier tomorrow as early as possible. So if it's approved, if you could send your electronic signatures, David, I'm happy to come out and get your signature at some point, time and place convenient for you.
I believe that Alyssa has already forwarded us those requests for electronic signature. So is the motion to approve the application for renewal for liquor license for Next Stage Arts?
So moved.
And I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
No.
Seeing as there is no discussion and I don't see anything in the chat, all those in favor of approval of the renewal of the liquor license for Next Stage Arts? Aye.
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 All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much. If you're marking your calendars, Next Stage has events planned Saturday, May 1 and Saturday, May 22nd, I believe, at the Putney Inn.
Cool.
Thank you. All right. So next for us, we will be we will adjourn our meeting of the Liquor Commissioners and call to order our regular Select Board meeting. It's now 5:56. Again, we're running behind, so I'm going to just try and keep things moving. Any adjustments to the agenda, Karen?
I just have two minor. I want to add approval of minutes from April 27th. They were draft, and we made slight revisions to those. And then
March 24th,
24th.
So it's
Yep.
March 1, right?
March 24th, not April.
March 24th, sorry. Thank you, Alyssa. And then I just want to move under select board items. The lawn mowing, landscaping bids, can we move that in front of the Asian community resolution?
Sure.
Only because John's going to be speaking on behalf of the cemetery commissioners.
Sounds good. All right, so do I hear a motion? So sorry, I don't have those dates in front of me.
It's we're doing the minutes, right? It's April 7th and March 24th.
Or
24th.
March 24th.
Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of April 7th and March 24th?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of April 7th and March 24th as presented. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Alyssa, for the minutes as usual. All right, so next would be warrants to the treasurer.
I'll make a motion to approve and execute the warrants to the treasurer as presented upon completion of review.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve and execute the minutes, the warrants. Karen, would you like to run through those for us, please?
I will. So payroll warrant dated April 23rd, 2021, in the amount of $19,511.40.
Any questions about that?
No.
All right.
So accounts payable warrant dated April 10th through April 23rd, 2021, in the amount of $53,130.12.
Karen, is Boundary Medical supplier to the fire department?
It is.
Okay. And Vermont Independent Media is the Commons?
What one was that?
Vermont Independent Media, is that the Commons? It is? Okay.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay, any other questions on the warrants? All right, it has been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants as presented. We have now completed review. If there's no further questions, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, so let's see. Next, public comment on items not on the agenda. Is there any public comment?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Two news items yesterday that are of interest to the town of Putney. First, Consolidated Communications published a press release and a web page announcing fiber to the premises internet in Brattleboro and surrounding towns, including Putney, with a service available. This is a symmetric service, same upload and download speeds at 50, 250, and 1,000 megabits per second. And this project, they say, is currently underway. So I'm just adding that to our information about potential broadband expansion in Putney. The other item is the American Rescue Plan Act is going to be sending a windfall to Vermont towns. It will be per capita. And in the case of Putney, it could amount to approximately $750,000 that would have to be spent before 2024. And in that regard, once we know more about it and about the conditions that the federal government puts on how we can spend the money, I shall be proposing that we ask the community to present proposals within the guideline and that we vote on them at town meeting via Australian ballot. So just two news items that I feel are important in the case folks have not run across them. I should mention the information on the American Rescue Plan that I quoted is from a story in VT Digger, which you can see on their website.
Great. Thank you very much. And it looked to me like maybe Fletcher, you were hoping to say something?
I have some comments, but they relate to the Equity and Inclusion Committee, so maybe they're better left till you get to that item.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. All right.
Hang on, John has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Okay, John, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to let everyone in the community know that today I received a notification from the VSNP program, which is the program used to assist people of limited means spay and neuter their pets. They're out of money because people aren't licensing their dogs, and dog licenses are way down here in Putney. $4 of the license fee goes to that program. I think it's a worthwhile program to prevent unwanted animals. So if you haven't registered your dog yet, please do so. We're using the drop box at Town Hall. We're doing it by mail. I understand that it's really hard to get a vet appointment, so we're being a little bit flexible on rabies. I have a list of people who I know have appointments down the road who have licensed their dogs, and we're going to follow up with them. But if you could just license your dog, and let's get VSNP funded.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I thought of a question apropos what our town clerk just said, and I guess I would address my question to him. Are there any consequences for not licensing a dog?
That kind of remains to be seen. We're waiting for the Westminster town meeting. Right now, if you fail to license your dog, you're going to be cajoled by me and my office. We don't currently have an animal control officer. Hopefully we will get one, so there'll be a little bit more consequence. You know, it's just good sense to license your dog. I mean, a couple times a year I get a call from somebody who's found a dog with, you know, tag number 23 or whatever, and I'm like, oh, that dog lives there, and the dog is returned to its owner. It also funds the VSNP program, and the town generates a little bit of revenue. So license your dog.
We do, Mr. Fairman, have the ability to levy fines if we choose, but we don't have any means of enforcement. So that's what John was referring to in saying Westminster town meeting. We have allocated funding, as you may recall, towards the hiring of a larger community animal control officer, and we're hopeful that the other towns involved will do that as well. And the sheriff's office is looking to try and provide that for us. So that would shift that equation, hopefully. All right. Are there any other public comments on items not on the agenda? All right. So next up would be Dan DeWalt from Restorative Community Justice of Southern Vermont. Dan, unfortunately, I can't see you because of the way my screen is arranged, but I'm guessing you're here. So Dan, go ahead.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My organization, Restorative Community Practice of Vermont, is sponsoring in a couple of towns, in Newfane and in Putney, a series of community circles. And the goal of these circles is, after the trauma of COVID and after the political divide we've been going through in the country, a lot of towns are experiencing divisions within townspeople and neighbors, and it's been a difficult situation. So we are trying to sponsor some community circles that are a two-part endeavor. We start with a couple of circles of just community building circles where people are getting a chance to just be heard for what their own experience has been, what their own interests and fears and worries are. And then after a couple of community building circles, we actually focus in on, and we hopefully have been informed through those circles a little bit about what are some of the conflicts in town, or what are some of the issues that divide folks. And then if people are willing to follow up with the circle on those issues, we meet individually with everyone before the circle, and then we have actually conflict resolution circles or community building circles where people actually address the issues that are dividing them. And using the restorative practice methods that we do in facilitation, we guarantee that there is a safe venue and a safe place for those discussions to take place, and then everyone has a chance to really be heard and I'll emphasize again because it's really important, in a safe manner. So folks that disagree vehemently with each other know that they can fully express what they have to say and they won't be put down. And also, by having worked with us prior to the circles, they will also know that what they will be telling the rest of the circle about is their own experience, because that's, we can make assumptions about other people, but we can really talk about ourselves. So I'm here tonight to tell the board about this as general information, and to invite the board consider participating in these circles with us in one or all of them, if you would be willing to. And also, to whatever degree, we're looking for folks from all walks of life in the community. And I live over in South Newfane, so I don't know folks in Putney that well. So we're just reaching out to all organizations we can to get some leads on who we might contact. We were happy to contact people individually and invite them. And we're inviting you as a group, and we're inviting the whole town via BCTV right now. So that's our project, and my pitch to you is just to introduce us and see if I could entice any of you folks to join us, or just elicit your response, I guess.
Can you, I understand, Dan, that you have had a couple circles in Putney and attendance has not been what you would hope for. I'm wondering, one, what you might attribute that to, and also what your schedule is looking like going forward.
Well, that part of we think part of what we might attribute that to is the last couple Saturday afternoons were unbelievably beautiful. I had to tear myself in, from outside to come in myself. So that's one factor. And I think also, we reached out to the Putney Facebook page. We've done some outreach, but I think, like when they say, it takes just a lot of repetition to really get it into people's consciousness. So we had scheduled for Saturdays. We postponed the next 2 Saturdays, and we're going to start again on Tuesday. We're going to try Tuesday evenings at 7 o'clock, 7 to 9, starting on May 4th. So May 4th would be a general community building circle. And then the following 2 weeks would be circles where we would hopefully have people be willing to sign up and actually talk about this divisions within the town, or things that are dividing folks.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Fairman.
I have a suggestion for Mr. DeWalt, given that he mentioned he's not that familiar with Putney. Typically, community discussions of this kind happen at and may be organized by the Putney Public Library. So he might wish to contact Emily Zervis, our Putney Town Library librarian, to discuss that possibility.
Thanks, Howard. We did do that. We spoke with her. I spoke with her Pelletier at the school. We spoke to the board of the Putney Co-op. And yeah, thank you. We're basically any suggestion that has been offered us, we've tried to follow up on.
Okay, good. Dan, one of the questions that has come up in equity and inclusion discussions, and I'm sorry if I'm catching you off guard with this question, but we have considered and talked about the possibility of how we would look at a grievance process for anybody who felt that some sort of injustice was inflicted upon them in an equity and inclusion sort of realm. And I'm wondering whether that's the kind of thing that you folks take on, or do you try and stay with a broader topic?
No, we do take that on. We do individual, folks will call us up with family conflict or workplace conflicts or institutional conflicts. And we will work with people individually on their individual relational breakups or conflict resolution issues. At the same time, we do training, so we train people how to do this work. And at the same time, we're reaching out to do these general work, like what we're trying to do in Putney and Newfane at the moment. So it's kind of a combination. But yeah, if folks, and if you had a committee in town that were having trouble within the committee or argument between the board and people in the town, that we would be happy to work individually with you folks to have a restorative circle. You know, you would contact us, we would contact all the folks involved, do the background work, do the preparatory work, and then have a restorative circle. And we do all that free of charge. We're a community service organization and a nonprofit 501c3 organization. I didn't mention that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do other folks have questions?
I'll share. This is Swift Everdy, and I was just at the end of the first restorative justice meeting, and I guess what I noticed and what I've been hearing from the people that have been going is just recognizing that a lot of the people that are there are really already on the same page. So, and that's great to have community time with the community members you already agree with, that you already know and already have connections with. But the intention of these circles is really these places of getting to these places where we're uncomfortable and creating a safe space within that discomfort. And there's been a lot of discomfort in Putney this past year. So that's what these circles are for. So really inviting anyone that has felt any of that discomfort to please join in, because I've witnessed the facilitation and I know that it is definitely an equitable space where everyone can really be heard. There's boundaries, there's a really safe container, and they're really well facilitated and experts at this. So just putting my plug in there, because I really do think this can help some of the conflicts that have been coming up, finding some sort of resolution, stepping towards that possibly.
And Michelle Alexoff has added in the chat that having gone to a couple of the circles that this organization has facilitated, I found them really well orchestrated, and exemplary, with a safe feeling space to share community dialogue. It would be great to see more folks attend. You can have much more dialogue with the community if the community shows up. So that would also be a plug from Michelle. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan. And Tuesday, May 4th at 7 p.m. Is that right?
And then I should mention, if you would like to sign up, just go to RCJSVT, which stands for Restorative Community Justice of Southern Vermont.org. And you can sign up for them then. If you'd like, we'd be happy to send you a link to the select board. We could email you a link if you were interested also, or for you or to share.
Good. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
All right. So next, we have state representatives Michael Mrowicki and Michelle Bos-Lun with a state report. I can see Michelle on my screen, and I think I saw that Mike was somewhere out there. So I will open the floor to either of you.
Thanks, Josh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thanks for the opportunity here for Michelle and I to come and check in, give a report. We certainly appreciate the work that you're doing and want to make sure that where the opportunities are for us to help or bring something directly to the legislature, that we have those lines of communication going. I'll give a little bit a short report on my perspective here, and then Michelle can, and we'll certainly be open to taking questions, hearing questions or suggestions from you or anyone here. I would start by saying that COVID, climate, and systemic racism continue to be the big headline concerns of this session. There's some good news on COVID. Vaccination rates continue to accelerate, and we may be in a situation soon where supply of vaccinations will exceed demand, and that's a good dynamic to be in. We're on course right now, the way it's going, that we may see an 80% rate of vaccination in Vermont, which would certainly bring us to herd immunity. And with that, the governor has suggested that we may be looking at July 4th for a lifting of all the COVID safety procedures that we've been under. We've been using emergency procedures for state and local government as well, and I sent Karen a copy of a bill we're working on now, S87, which will maintain those emergency procedures for meetings right on down for the legislature, select boards, BCAs. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to speak up or get in touch with us. The economy continues to be a big concern. There's a lot of businesses that are treading water, and we want to make sure we're getting help out to where it's needed. And that's something we're working on, and hopefully there will be more forthcoming. It looks like town roads will get a bump from the state. We're looking at hopefully getting a bump in the monies that are going to be put out to try and expand broadband. And this is, I know, something we're all trying to focus on. Is broadband has, or the need for broadband has certainly been amplified and laid bare the needs for during COVID. Some good news on the economy. Retail was up 9% in March nationwide, and Vermont's unemployment rate's down to 2.9%, which is not far from where it was before the pandemic. So I think as people start to get vaccinated more, the economy is going to benefit from that, and all of us will. And I know personally, last weekend I went down to visit my daughter and her 2-year-old for the first time since last October, and it was a wonderful thing to be able to do that. In regards to climate, last session we passed the Climate Solutions Council, and while that's been slow to get some momentum going, they'll be setting goals for reducing carbon and trying to organize the work that's going, so that work isn't going in silos that could diffuse the efforts. One thing we're continuing to try and push the governor on is to join the Transportation Climate Initiative. This is a multi-state effort. I think there's 14 states that have been working together to try and pull together organized efforts to work on transportation. In Vermont, transportation and home heating are the two biggest parts of our carbon footprint, and this would go far to adding to what we're trying to do. We're hoping that it would give us the resources to pull together a statewide public transportation plan, which we don't have right now. It's complicated by the rural nature of Vermont and us being having such great distances, but it can be done. I think it's not an intractable problem, but we would do well to be organized with other states on this, and we're hoping the governor will see the benefits of this. We're moving towards expanding the home weatherization plan too. Home weatherization is some of the low-hanging fruit in Vermont, but we've been focusing, as we should, primarily on low-income people. There's still a lot of old housing stock in Vermont, and what we're going to try and do is expand home weatherization efforts to a little higher income levels, working in middle-class people who might not be able to afford this without help from the state. And we feel there's multiple benefits there. It benefits the individual family. It benefits our carbon footprint. We're doing a lot of work in agriculture, and especially agriculture's effect on the climate. Agriculture and forestry are 30% of Vermont's economy. And the work that's happening there can do a lot to sequester more carbon. 2 years ago, Vermont passed some new required agricultural practices, which help regenerative soil practices so that the carbon that we sequester can stay there, and then forest management is also a part of that. And that's why one of the reasons current use, I think, is still one of the better programs we have, where anybody that's in current use has to have a forest management plan. Lastly, I'll address some of the work we're doing on systemic racism. It was encouraging to hear the jury decision yesterday in the George Floyd murder case. And the consensus seems to be that this is just one step, though. One step to accountability for all of us, and that we have much more to do. I'm glad to see Putney's ongoing efforts and efforts all around the state. As a member of the Legislative Racial and Social Equity Caucus, as is Michelle, we're pushing on many fronts, and one of them is economic opportunity. And Representative Sarah Coffey and I have been working with Curtis Reed to bring some of his ideas on economic development for BIPOC businesses. And some of those are going to be incorporated in a commerce bill that will be, we hope will be, has passed the House and will be taken up by the Senate. I'm going to stop there and introduce my new district mate, Michelle. But first I want to say what a good job she's doing. Michelle has stepped right in during pandemic times. It's not easy to come in at any time as a freshman, but she's jumped right in with both feet. I think she's doing great work. She's certainly adding her part, as many of us want to increase the number of women in the legislature. She's added, and to our legislative delegation here in Windham County, we have 14 members, 11 of them are women. So we're doing our part to raise the profile of women in the legislature. She's been great to work with, and I think she's going to continue to do some good work, and I think we're all well served by having her working here with us. So, Michelle?
Okay, thanks, Mike. Sorry, I've had some mic issues going on. Of course, right when it was my turn to speak, my phone started ringing, so I hope it'll stay quiet and clear so you'll be able to hear me. So as Mike said, you know, our legislative session has not been a typical one. All I can speak to is my experience, which has been 100% remote legislation. So all that I know has come through my screen. In the same way we're meeting today, this is how we've done all of our work this year. The areas that we've worked on most recently that we've passed legislation out of the House for have been really, really broad. I'll start specifically with broadband, which is something that people have mentioned. One of the first bills that we passed out of the House was a broadband expansion bill. And our hope is that we'll be able to use some of the federal one-time funds to expand broadband in our community here in the Windham 4 district, as well as throughout the state. So that was actually a really nice nudge in the direction that all of us want to be going. Most recently, just in the last couple of weeks, we also passed legislation which was tax reform. For the most part, it was not anything dramatic. There were some minor changes around corporate taxes. There were some minor changes around taxes related to things that you might access from the cloud, but they were relatively small. So hopefully nobody's going to be socked with a tremendous bill that they find alarming. It really did seem that the Appropriations Committee did some hard work and came up with a proposal that will be fair to everyone. I would say too, I mean, along with what Mike mentioned in terms of social equity issues and climate solution issues, another area that we've been working on has been, I would expand a little bit, just talking about transportation. So earlier in the term, one of the first bills that we passed out of the House actually was a transportation modernization bill, which was working on some of those goals Mike was talking about related to trying to get Vermont to have a more comprehensive system. But in particular, what we accomplished with the bill that we passed was some incentives to improve people getting rid of old vehicles that are big polluters and being able to upgrade. And that's true whether you're talking about upgrading to an electric bicycle or an electric car, or if you're a business that wants to offer an electric charging station, things along those lines. So we did do some legislation that addresses how we can try and impact our climate situation by making affordable and sustainable technologies available to a broader range of people. I would say one other area that I've been working on, I'm on the Corrections and Institutions Committee, and we've spent a lot of time working on justice reinvestment or criminal justice reform. Just today, actually, my committee presented a bill which was related to reforming the probation system, which actually gives people an opportunity who have been doing well on probation, who have not been violating their conditions, and who have been staying in compliance with all the things that were expected of them. It will give them a chance to get off earlier, which will be easier on the system and easier on them, because statistically, people who have been in compliance in the first half of their term are likely to be in compliance for the second half of their term, and it's really not beneficial to anybody to keep people under supervision of the Department of Corrections for a longer time than is necessary. So I think we're doing some good work. One other issue, I guess the last one I'll just close on sorry, my dog has something to say as well. One other issue that I just wanted to touch on that we've been hearing a lot about, and that Mike in particular on his committee has been doing a lot of work on, is the pension situation. I think all of you have probably heard about that. We have a really complicated situation here in Vermont where we don't have enough money in the system for a system to be sustained unless we make some changes. So we're trying to figure out what are the changes that we could make that will still be fair to the people who have spent their life working for our children and working for our state. And we're doing a lot of hard work on that, looking at that in a lot of different ways. And I'm hopeful. We've made some changes just in the last couple of weeks. We've changed the pace of what we're figuring to accomplish this year. We're giving ourselves a little bit more time to work on solutions that are going to be more acceptable to everybody. So I actually have another meeting in 3 minutes, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them now briefly, or you're welcome to write me or call me, and I'm happy to talk with people one-on-one as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat. Any questions for Michelle? I don't hear anybody, so Mike might be able to stay with us for a few minutes longer, but thank you very much, Michelle, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I worked at the Community Justice Center in Brattleboro before I had this job, and I'm still a volunteer. And my committee meets at this point only about once a month, and tonight is my night. So I need to go talk with my guy who is working his way back into being a constructive society member, and I have great confidence in him, and I want to make sure I show up on time and show him that he's still a priority, even though I'm not in that role as a worker. I'm still a volunteer with them, and I really believe in the work that they do.
Perfect.
Nice to see everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yep,
you.
bye.
So does anybody have questions for Mike?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Representative Mrowicki, the state pension fund situation has been mentioned, and of course is widely mentioned in the news. Now, the shortfall amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars. In other words, it's been accumulating for years, if not decades. How did this happen?
You're muted.
Like,
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have to smile every time I hear the Mr. Fairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman. There's a regular rhythm you have going here. But thanks for that question, Howard. I'll try and make it short, but it's a complicated situation. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, the people who were running state government decided that they could reduce the amount that they were putting into the pension funds in the hope that performance would make up for what they weren't putting in. That didn't happen. And so going back around 20 years and then culminating in 2007, a plan was put in place, similar to a mortgage plan, a plan to put certain amounts of money in each year, and hopefully in 20 years when money was needed, it would be there. And we've been on track. The state has been putting the required amounts in. Last year, well, before that, we've been matching, like a lot of employers, 1-to-1. But we've been putting extra amounts in since 2007. What we noticed last year was that the funds were not performing as hoped for, and that we felt like we needed to first of all make that information available to people and let everybody know there's a problem here. There's a problem and we've got to deal with it. There are 4 major funds that we're looking at here: the Teachers Retirement Fund, the State Employees Retirement Fund, and Municipal Employees Retirement Fund, and then there's the Healthcare for Retirees Fund, which is a little bit different. Currently, the Municipal Employees Fund is in good shape, about 80% funded, which is where people tell us it should be, and maybe that has something to do with the contributions there by employees are 11%. The State Employees Fund is at about 68%, and state employees contribute about 7%. The Teachers Fund is the one that really has us worried. They're only funded right now at about 51%. And the teachers have the lowest contribution rate of 5%. So what we're trying to do, first of all, is address the governance of the investment board. We feel like while the people who have been on the board, who are primarily union members, have been certainly well-meaning, they seem to be overmatched at a time when markets have been performing very well over the last 10 years at about 13%. They've only been averaging about a 7% yield. We need to do better. We need to up that because right now about 1/3 of the amount we're looking at is because of not meeting goals. So that's the first piece we're going to try and overtake. And we want to get people with financial backgrounds on these boards to make these decisions. The second piece is what do we do about the amounts that we're short on. Last year, the legislature added $200 million above the $40 million employees were putting in. This year, the employees are going to be put in about 40 million again, and the state's going to be adding 300 million. And we're hoping to be able to move another 150 million. So that's going to be $450 million, almost $500 million that we're going to be contributing. The challenge is if we don't keep making investment performance goals, that amount the state's going to have to be putting in is going to continue to rise to the point that it's going to choke off other parts of the budget. And worst case scenario is you look at states like Illinois, which this year is going to be putting almost 30% of its entire state budget into pension funds. We don't want to get to that point. That's why we raised the flag. There's a problem here, and where we're at right now is trying to address the governance and putting together a task force that will try and address the other concerns.
Right. Thank you.
Representative Mrowicki, I would simply like to say that the reason I asked you the question was I knew that I would receive an answer that is the best I have ever heard in the from anyone who's been quoted in the news media. You really are very good at what you do. Thank you.
Well, I wish I could take credit for it, but I'm actually just parroting what Representative John Gannon on our committee has been sharing and teaching with us about. This is a time when Representative Gannon is a retired lawyer from the Securities and Exchange Commission. So he knows this system as well as anybody, and I've certainly learned a lot from him. And I would say that we're all working hard to try and make the best of a really tough situation here, but this is a lot of people's futures depend on this, and we want to do the right thing.
Good. Thank you, Mike. Any other questions for Mike? We are tight on time, so but I don't want to discourage people if they have specific questions, and Mike is here, but I know Mike also often touts his easiest phone number in Putney, and you can certainly reach out to Mike directly if you have specific questions. But
387-8787.
I didn't know whether I should say it, Mike, so I withheld. But I remembered it because the last time I called it. So
It's no secret. Operators are standing by now to take your calls. But I also want to share something that we're on May 25th. It'll be 1 year since George Floyd was murdered, and some of us are already starting to organize a vigil in town that will coincide with vigils across the country. So I want to start putting the word out that we could probably gather on the sidewalk as we did last summer, but I think this is an important milestone because I think a lot of good work is going to come. Unfortunately, somebody had to lose their life for that. So just to spread the word, May 25th, downtown Putney will be in vigil.
thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. All right. If there aren't any further questions for Mike, we are going to move on. And I think we are at the point of shifting our agenda briefly to go, oh no, sorry, we're going to do the local emergency management plan review and adoption. And for those of you who have not been with us for this before, this is an annual procedure that we undertake, and it's often, our part of it is often largely updating sort of the names and phone numbers related to it, et cetera. But I'm going to turn it over to Chief Tom Goddard to walk us through it.
Good evening. So every year we have to, we're required to, as well as all other municipalities in the state, we're required to submit to the state our annual local emergency management plans. Throughout each year, typically they're updated. At least here, they're updated to certain degrees depending upon occurrences and required changes and things we need to address, so on and so forth. And one of the bigger parts of that is, as Josh mentioned, obviously contact information, key representatives of the town and each department in town, and so on and so forth. So the plan, as it stands now, is very current. We've made a significant number of changes within the plan relative to pandemics, specifically related to what we've learned and what has actually taken place during the COVID-19 pandemic. So a lot there has been updated. We did make a few other changes throughout modifications throughout the plan as necessary. Obviously, and we talk about this every year. I understand that there is a lot of information in the plan that you folks might not simply get a hold of or have a true hold on. And all I can say to that, and Josh, I don't know how many years you and I have shared this back and forth, and the sentiment generally is, don't get overly concerned about it. The folks that need to know the plan like the back of their hand, we do, and most generally we're going to be the ones doing all the work. We're just going to come to you folks with information and with certain requests for input and guidance and so on and so forth from time to time during any major event. So just rest assured that the plan is our framework for response, and we take it from there during when we need to respond for major events. So that again, the plan needs to be updated every year, which it has been, like I just talked about, and we need to submit it to the Wyndham Regional Commission. They review it, submit it to the state, and then it's then forwarded to FEMA as part of documentation to FEMA. which allows us, puts us in a position where in the event of a major emergency, and declarations emergency declarations are made by local municipalities and the state, puts us in line to receive emergency funding that will come into play. Without this plan, or if this plan is not as accurate as it should be, then we wouldn't be in a position to receive those funds when they come available to us. So again, what we're looking for tonight is for you to approve the plan or approve adoption of the plan. And then Josh, as the select board chair, you'll need to sign it. And then Karen, as the trained representative of municipal administration, she'll have to sign it. Once that document's fully signed, I'll take it and I'll put the plan together and forward it to Wyndham Regional, and then it'll go up the chain from there.
Thanks, Tom. I'll just clarify one thing. Eileen, you may or may not sort of be familiar with this, but as Tom alluded to, our responsibility is largely the select board's responsibility is largely to sort of be supportive to those who are fully trained and equipped to do this work. And in the most extreme of circumstances, what that would require of us largely would be being available to approve either release of funding as necessary and or other town assets that if there were any reason we needed to be involved in decision making about use of town equipment, et cetera, then we make ourselves available for that. But otherwise, we largely would leave it to those who are the emergency management group that do that work for us. So, yeah, go ahead, Eileen.
Yeah, so obviously I'm still catching up on this. I remember from last year when the whole COVID thing came crashing down on us that you guys are spending a fair amount of time, I think every week. Was that part of that process? Are we still under that declaration? I think the state is still, there's still a state of emergency.
Yes, that's correct.
So are we still operating under that?
Yes.
Okay.
Technically, and in a very broad sense, we are. In certain areas of the state, things are still ramped up pretty heavy because of need. Here, things have relaxed significantly over the last few months because the need has not been there.
Yeah. Okay. It's more like a prolonged emergency than an
acute
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
No, and I think that you're right. I mean, we met weekly for the first several months of after the governor's emergency orders were put in place. And that was largely because we didn't fully know what to expect. So we wanted to be informed and updated as regularly as possible so that if we needed to shift our actions or behaviors in any way, we were able to do that and be informed about that. And certainly Tom and Karen are in regular discussion about the need for, if we need to be available, then we're there for Tom as he needs us. So I would entertain a motion to adopt and approve the local emergency management plan.
So move.
I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve and adopt the local emergency management plan as presented. Is there any further discussion? I don't hear anything. I don't see anything in the chat. So with no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you so much for you and everybody else that works on this. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Karen.
Yes.
What's going to be the best way for me to get the signed form?
So We can do electronic.
Okay, so if
And
you
then
can,
Alyssa can send it over to you.
okay, great. So if the sooner I can get it in, the better. So,
Okay.
We
Great.
can all, if it's better for you, Tom, I'm happy to connect somewhere tomorrow if you want.
okay. All right, Karen, will you be able to or no?
No, I won't be in tomorrow.
Okay,
If you require my signature, it's going to have to be early.
okay. Or, well, we can hold off until Monday.
Do you need an original signature or can it be electronic?
No, it can be electronic.
All right, Alyssa she has that
Okay,
for me.
all right, good deal.
Okay.
Good.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we are, as per Karen's request, we're just going to rearrange right now and go to the lawn mowing and landscaping bids review and recommendation.
Yes, so in your packets, you have lawn mowing bids, you have landscaping services, and you have lawn mowing and spring fall cleanup for cemeteries. Jonathan Johnson, as cemetery commissioner, will speak on the cemeteries. We'll start off with the lawn mowing services. And we had 4 bids. Originally, and I'll let the board remind the board that originally we put this out to bid in December and we only received 1 bid. So at that time, I made a statement that we would put it back out to bid. As you see in your packet, we did receive 4 bids for mowing the town properties. So that includes the library, town hall, the pool, and the fire station, and the green space along the sidewalks. So it is my recommendation, and it may not be the board's, but Castine came in with the lowest bid at $2,850. The second bid would have been McGowan at $4,290. Independent Landscaping, $4,660. And Vermont Hillside at $4,770. So mowing usually begins around May and goes into the fall. Given the summertime too, if it's dry, we know there'll probably be less mowings, but the number of mowings for all 4 are relatively the same.
Is this the first year that Castine has put in a bid?
It is.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in my memory, McGowan's been doing it for a while.
That's correct. So this bid right here is a 2-year contract. McGowan had a 3-year contract.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just interested, I mean, the number of mowings, Eric is significantly lower than anybody else, and he's the one that has done it a number of times. Does that say anything we should be paying attention to? Or if the number of mowings is less than because of a dry year or any number of other reasons, does that decrease the cost, or are we signing the contract and that's what the contract is?
No, it's by the contract, Josh.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a lump sum?
No, so they invoice us throughout the season. So when they mow, they send us an invoice.
So it is by mowing.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh. And so, but it's interesting that Castine's price per mowing is significantly less than everybody else's.
Right.
And Brett is confident that he has the personnel to do this?
Yes.
Yeah, he certainly he isn't new to doing this. He may be new to doing it for the town, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to him a little bit, and actually I talked to more than one contractor throughout this process. And so Brett does mow for the town of Dummerston. He does their cemeteries, actually. So other than that, I'm not sure. I'm not, entirely sure, but if they put a bid in here, I'm confident that they can meet the schedule and our mowings will get done.
so I noticed he doesn't have a bid for the cemeteries here, though.
He did not put one in, and he told me he would not put one in.
Uh-huh.
So
That's too bad.
So it's your recommendation to go with Castine for the town mowing work?
the town public buildings, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's a significant price difference. I mean, like David said, he's certainly got plenty of experience mowing, so Brett should know what he's up against. I'm guessing his overhead must be a little lower, which allows him to do it that way. He's got the appropriate insurance coverage.
Yes, we have certificate of insurances from all of the contractors.
And you said this is a 2-year commitment.
It's a 2-year contract, yes.
But that's a price per year.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
I'm good with that.
Make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we take your recommendation and approve the mowing of the town properties lawns to Castine.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve Castine for mowing of town building properties. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, all of you who submitted bids. And thank you, Brett, for coming in with your estimate. All right. So now next we move to landscaping service requests. So
Correct.
this is a little bit different. This is largely fall and spring cleanup and then sort of tidy up of the, particularly right around town hall and the library.
That's correct. So some obvious spring cleaning and then putting down mulch and doing some weeding and pruning back any bushes. And it's just for town hall and library. And then in the fall, there's a little bit of, cleanup and, raking of the leaves and getting all that stuff off the lawns. So we had 3 bids on there, and Independent Landscapers was the lowest bid at $2,665. And then McGowan was at $2,930, and Vermont Hillside was at $4,160. So my recommendation here is Independent Landscapers. They are out of Newfane, Vermont, and they also do work with the town of Brattleboro, and specifically cemeteries. And I spoke to Carol a lot, who was a reference, and she gave me a positive recommendation for Independent Landscapers.
And they are aware that this is not tied to the mowing bid, is that correct?
They will be, yep.
If it's, if they, so you said they will be, would it be worth it to them to come out to Brattleboro if they didn't have both?
No, and you know something, Eileen, we thought of that too. And this here too is a 2-year contract. So, you know, in the past, we tried to like keep one vendor, but because of the economic situation right now, you know, at this point, we're looking at low bids and, you know, who knows in 2 years, you know, it could change, you know, and, you know, maybe we go back to one vendor because the prices, you know, work.
But again, they are aware that they don't necessarily get both bids.
That's correct. These are all separate bids.
Independent bids, okay.
That's correct.
Correct. Well, I just wouldn't want to be, you know, recommend that they get the contract and then have them turn us down because they didn't get both.
No, Independent Landscape just in the comments said, yes, we are aware. And they are here with us, so if
okay.
you
All right.
ask that
Now you
question,
know. All right. That's fine. I just didn't want to go through the whole process and then have to start it back up again.
no, I think we're good.
All right. So Karen's recommendation is to go with a 2-year contract with Independent Landscapers for maintenance of the gardens around the library and the town hall at a rate of $2,665 per year. Your motion to approve that.
So moved.
And seconded.
So it's been moved and seconded to take Karen's recommendation to engage in a contract with Independent Landscapers, amount of $2,665 per year for 2 years. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next would be cemeteries. So John, do you want Karen to talk about this, John, or you want to start?
John can.
The cemetery, in addition to being town clerk and fence viewer, green up day coordinator, I'm also a cemetery commissioner. And so we met this afternoon, and based on the strong recommendation from Brattleboro that Karen had shared with me via email, we unanimously approved recommending Independent Landscaping to mow and do the spring and fall cleanups in the Putney town cemeteries. I don't know if you're aware of this, but we typically have gone over budget, primarily in mowing. And this budget, the proposal is less than we typically spend, which would make some more money available for some cleanup on the small cemeteries. We have some tree work that we'd like to get done. And then again, based on the recommendation from Brattleboro, the Cemetery Commission recommends Independent Landscaping be awarded the contract to mow the cemeteries in Putney and do the spring and fall cleanups.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
And seconded.
So it's been moved and seconded to accept the recommendation from the cemetery commissioners to go with Independent Landscaping for mowing and fall and spring cleanup of the cemeteries. Is there any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, then all in favor? Aye. All right. Again, thank you all for submitting bids, and thank you for willingness to work with us.
Thank you, John, for staying.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Be well.
You too. All right. So, Karen, we have, let's see. where did sorry. We want to go now to Asian Community Resolution.
Yes.
Okay, so next on the agenda would be the resolution related to violence against the Asian community. Sorry, I'm scrolling, trying to find that resolution.
It's hidden in there somewhere.
Yes. Okay, so I will go ahead and read the resolution if that's okay with everybody. This is the Barry City resolution. Is that the one we're going with, or?
No, there's a there's
okay. Sorry. Yeah.
updated one.
Yep. Okay, so in the year 2021, resolved by the Select Board adds the town of Putney as follows. Whereas Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have reported nearly 3,800 incidents perpetrated against them nationwide since the start of the pandemic and have been the target of verbal and physical unprovoked attacks based solely on their ethnicity. And whereas recent shootings in Georgia targeting Asian-owned businesses resulted in the murder of 8 people, including 6 women of Asian background. And whereas Congress passed House Resolution 908 on September 17, 2020, condemning all forms of anti-Asian sentiment as related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas President Joseph R. Biden released a memorandum condemning and combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States on January 26, 2021, be resolved that the Putney Select Board condemns and denounces any and all anti-Asian sentiment in any form and will not tolerate acts of aggression against Asian community members by any Putney employee or agent thereof. And the Putney Select Board condemns all manifestations of expressions of racism, xenophobia, discrimination, scapegoating, and ethnic or religious intolerance against any of its residents by any Putney employee or agent thereof. Adopted this 21st day of April at Putney, Winter County, Vermont. Do I hear a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Right. It's been moved and seconded.
Right?
Been moved and seconded to approve a resolution condemning hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. That would open the topic to discussion if anybody would like to comment or question. Vanessa.
So I'm wondering if this language doesn't end up being unwittingly exclusionary and complicate what we might actually want to be saying as a town and as a people, which is that we will not tolerate violence, hate, xenophobia, racism, misogyny, in any form against any citizen or non-citizen. And that, you know, we might be better served making a broader kind of human and civil rights statement than going through, you know, dividing, really actually kind of dividing a populace between Asian and Black, Indigenous, people of color, white. And I wonder too, well, the lists that you just gave clearly means that there is no legal issue as a town, but just would we not be better served to make the statement in a more universal, in more universal terms.
I will relay that Vanessa and I have had this conversation to some degree, and I share her concern. I guess my feeling would be that would be an appropriate resolution for us to come up with that has broader. I mean, part of the discussion that Vanessa and I had about it was the fact that there have been, I can't remember the exact dates, but in 30 days recently, there were 50 mass shootings in this country. You know, we as a select board can't keep ahead of that in a realistic manner in order to make individual statements to condemn each and every one of those in how they were relayed. And I know they weren't all hate crimes, and I know Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have been specifically targeted in the last year, a lot of because of the language that was perpetrated from the administration that existed at the time. I guess my feeling would be I'm very comfortable passing this resolution because I think it's appropriate. I'm also comfortable entertaining a broader motion for a resolution in the future. And I want to be, in approving this, or in my own personal feeling that we should approve this, I want to make a clear statement that I agree with Vanessa that I personally, and I think the select board would certainly agree, condemn violence in this country against all people for all reasons. But I don't want to minimize the impact of violence against any one specific group. And I know Vanessa does not intend that by making this statement. But Eileen.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment in general. This came out of a specific open letter from the Asian community to boards like ours, condemning our silence in this particular matter. And so that's where that came up for me. I've also been realizing that there's been dozens and dozens of things going on since we last just even discussed this 2 weeks ago. And like you said, we can't keep up. But I do feel that this specific statement needs to be said, not only because of the shootings in Georgia, but because this has been going on, and Asian people in particular have been targeted because of the pandemic and the way that has been characterized. So I think it's time to say this particular thing, and that going forward, we certainly need to say it again and again and again whenever something happens, or just when we need to. And I don't know if we all have the time to write these resolutions in a timely fashion. I think that's when we get a good group of people on an equity and inclusion committee. I think that's where one of the things that they could take on is to write concise resolutions for us in a more timely manner.
Well, you know, as a person of Asian descent who has been called all sorts of names relating to my heritage, I certainly appreciate the resolution, and I just wanted to put it out there that at some point we should revisit, and, you know, as Josh was saying, and you were saying the other day, make a statement about condemning violence, all violence against all people in this country.
And I think tonight, again, I'm very happy to participate in approving this resolution if that's what we choose to do. I also want to just verbally, again, make the statement that I and the select board condemns violence against all peoples for all reasons. I mean, you know, it is really disturbing and upsetting what we've been seeing in the news recently. It's just, it's overwhelming to try and pay attention and not be overwhelmed by it, and not recognize that how just how widespread the issues that certainly face our country and our world are in this moment, but particularly right now, I think in this country, highlighting you know, mass shootings in particular, and the fact that they are so common is just very disturbing. And that is certainly not an anti-Second Amendment statement. It is just a statement of my own personal distress related to mass shootings, because we shouldn't have weapons for that purpose. But all right, so if there is no further discussion, and I think that basically this serves as taking it under an advisement that that we will think about how to make proper statements as the times arise, but also to sort of just generally reiterate a global concern for these issues. But
right. Well, and again, as a person of Asian descent, I do appreciate the effort.
Thank you, and thank you for. I know Eileen, you worked to bring this in front of us, and I appreciate that. Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded to approve a resolution condemning hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. If there's no further discussion, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Last thing on our list under select board items, and equity and inclusion ended up under other business, and that was a miscommunication between Karen and I, because I am going to make a recommendation for some appointments in equity and inclusion. So for all practical purposes, we can move that up to select board items, but we didn't do that initially. But development review board appointment recommendation approval. It has been Charles Robichek, who I think goes by Charlie. I don't know whether he's here, but I'm pretty sure it goes by Charlie. Expressed an interest in being on the development review board, and I know Pitt Bannister has communicated with him and recommended that approval of that appointment. And as some of you may remember, Charlie was on the ballot for potentially being on the select board, and clearly is interested and committed to doing some town work. So I would happily entertain a recommendation to approve appointment for Charles Robichek to the Development Review Board.
I make a motion to appoint Charlie Robichek to the Development Review Board.
And I'll second that.
Pip, you want to comment, or are you good?
If you guys are going to approve it, that's great. I sent you a letter with my recommendation, and Charlie submitted a letter specifically stating his qualifications and requested consideration to be appointed as a DRB member. He is a very qualified DRB member. He would probably be a great benefit because we do quasi-judicial hearings, and it's a challenge to meet those requirements. So he'd be a great appointment. I encourage you to.
He's a long-term lawyer and very experienced in legal matters. So in that respect, easily capable of sort of the analytical end of looking at this kind of information, which is great. So All right, it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, then all those in favor? Aye. Good. Thank you, Pip, and thank you, Charlie, for your willingness to participate. We look forward to it. Karen, unless you object, I might go to equity and inclusion now. Is that okay with you? All right, so what, just a quick update from me would be that Swift and Mark Thurman and I have met now twice, maybe 3 times. Swift and I have spoken several times, but the 3 of us have met twice, and one of those times also included Eitan Nasreddin Longo, who is a resident of Putney, who also, he works, and I don't have the acronym in front of me, but he works, he is a co-chair of the group that works for fair and social policing at the Vermont State Police level. He also works with various legislative bodies to look at equity and inclusion issues. And I don't know exactly what capacity he does that in, but he's very involved in discussions at the state level and at the legislative level in how various different people are doing this. And I'm going to propose tonight that we appoint Swift, Everty, Mark Thurman, and Eitan Nasreddin Longo to be a working group to essentially work to come up with a clear charge for an equity and inclusion committee going forward. And I have also spoken with Ryland White, who is willing to participate, but has other commitments that make it so that it would be challenging for her in this moment to really be on a committee, but she is going to attend whenever she's available and is very interested in participating as well. But what we have spoken about, or what I have proposed, is that we work expeditiously to come up with a clear charge based on the resolution that we passed, which has pretty clear parameters for what we were expecting from an EIC committee. And then I have expressed certainly a willingness on my part, and I'm hopeful that the rest of the select board will agree, that if we come up with that charge and come up with some clear work that needs to be done, and get going on that work, and it all proceeds well, and there's good communication between the select board and the equity and inclusion committee, and that we all feel comfortable, that we can explore further opportunities for how to expand the role of the equity and inclusion committee in town beyond a sort of narrowly municipal conversation, which I think is part of the first work we need to do. But I think that Swift and Mark and I have had good conversations about sort of broader opportunities that we could explore and ways of looking that I think would be ultimately beneficial to the town. And whether that ends up being specifically exclusively generated from an equity and inclusion committee, or whether there are recommendations from an equity and inclusion committee that presumably would be appointed at a later date, that the community is, that essentially a group works to engage the community and encourage the community to really undertake doing a broader scope of this work in a more meaningful way. And I think part of what I have expressed is the challenge that the last year has presented of some of this stuff feeling very, I know this is hard and emotional work, but as we've talked about in these meetings in the past, the select board has to do what the select board has to do to run the town and what the select board mandate is. And as long as we can expand the role of equity and inclusion without overburdening the ability of the select board and or the staff in town hall, that I am certainly happy and willing to engage in that process. And I would intend to continue to be the select board representative to this committee and work to sort of forward that mission and vision. So, so yeah, David.
I just wanted to throw in a comment here that I got an email from Barra today saying that she had completed the research that she was going to do on the Keene committee, and that I got a many-page synopsis of the things that she thought were most. I read her words. I read through all the approved meeting minutes, which were for 12 of the 13 meetings. The minutes totaled 130 pages, and the final report was 11. My synopsis is 8. I pulled out the pieces that I thought were the most interesting and the most pertinent for Putney, and of course, I'll share this all with you. I haven't had time to read it. I got it today during the day and had a busy day, but I'm going to read it and I'll share it with you all. I don't know if that will be helpful or not, but I wanted to let you know that she had done what she said she would do. And
definitely, no, I think it's helpful. I mean, I think that to Mr. Fairman's point from the discussion last week, you know, we are not Keene, we are not Brattleboro, we're not Montpelier, et cetera, and I think we all recognize that. But I think there's also certainly value in looking at what other towns and organizations are doing and recommending that municipalities undertake or don't undertake. And I, you know, it's clear to me. I mean, you know, one thing, you know, Mark really made a compelling argument to say, you know, he was talking about how they're doing things at Landmark, which sounds like they're doing a lot of really great work. But he also talked a little bit about how Peter Eden can make recommendations and then people follow up on it and work gets done, and that's great. Of course, they're very well staffed, and we are not very well staffed. So I think one of the takeaways for me from that was that if we can figure out how to, and I know we have lots of dedicated and motivated people in town and with all sorts of valuable qualifications, if we can work on not feeling like that is a task that the select board has to take on, but that it's a task that the community is going to take on with the support of the select board and the support of an equity and inclusion committee, then I think I know that was the intent of the committee over the last, since its inception. Again, as Fletcher pointed out, you know, we had some missteps in how we all coordinated and the leadership aspects of that. And I don't want to discredit the work that was done in the last year and a half by the Equity and Inclusion Committee, because I know the intent and the motives are all good. I think that being able to sort of reset how that feels to all of us is an important aspect of this, and that some of that I already feel like there's a different perspective on. What Mark was saying is, why shouldn't we be a small town that's doing work that might not be expected of a small town? And I think that's great, and a really positive way of looking at it. And I hope we can do it without stretching any select board. You know, we're the ones sitting here right now, but any select board beyond their ability, and without stretching the staff in town hall beyond their ability, but all be supportive of each other in really sort of making clear statements about doing work that Putney wants to and needs to do, and that we have had a long history of being a town that tries to be progressive, and let's work on being progressive on this particular aspect in this moment. It's an opportunity for us because it's a good moment. There's lots of people talking about things that they haven't wanted to talk to about in a long time, and we should capitalize on that in a financial way, but in a motivational way. So I know Fletcher wanted to make some comments. Fletcher, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that this working group proposal will find a way forward to the presently disbanded Equity and Inclusion Committee. But I also continue to be concerned about how the Equity and Inclusion Committee was treated by this board up to this point. First, in regard to the legalities of committees, in its discussion of the role of the Equity and Inclusion Committee, this board has been presented with an interpretation of the Vermont Constitution, which asserts that committees absolutely cannot have any authority other than advisory. The argument has been supported by unattributed references to claimed Vermont Supreme Court precedent, specifically relating to Chapter 1, Article 6 of the Vermont Constitution, which it is claimed limits the authority of committees. There are a couple dozen Vermont Supreme Court decisions that deal with Chapter 1, Article 6. And specifically quoting from those decisions, the court has said, quote, "This article represents a core statement of founding principles. However, it is but a truism of a Republican form of government. Article 6 does not provide the specificity necessary to create legal entitlements with a definite character. The rights set out in the Vermont Bill of Rights, which includes Chapter 1, Article 6, are declared as guides to the legislative judgment rather than as marking an absolute limitation of power." In a 2012 decision, the court summarized the function of our Chapter 1, Article 6 by quoting Professor Peter Teachout, quote, "What the Vermont framers gave us when they declared that government officials were to be accountable to the people was not an idea with fixed political content, but rather commitment to a vision," close quote. The contrary interpretation you've been presented with is not a legal analysis. Rather, it is an ideological position looking for a legal hook to hang its hat on. It represents an ideological position that seeks to hobble the functions of government by restricting its ability to act through agents. So the real issue is not constitutional or statutory limits on committees. It's whether this board has the authority to delegate responsibility. If you do not believe that this board has the authority to delegate responsibility to act, meaning responsibility to be more than purely advisory to unelected agents, then you'd better tell Karen Astley that she needs to stop signing zoning permits. In regard to the specifics of this committee, it has also been repeatedly asserted that the role of the committee was clearly defined as only advisory in the resolution which established it. I've been advised that I should go back and review board discussions that took place around the establishment of the committee. I have done that, many hours of that. I've discovered that the restrictions on the activities of the committee that are now said to have been absolutely clearly stated were not so clear as they are now asserted. Even the resolution establishing the committee is not so clearly limited. The portion of the September 11, 2019 resolution which establishes the role of the committee reads as follows, quote, "The purpose of the Equity and Inclusion Committee is to identify and advise the Select Board on addressing inequities and encouraging inclusive practices in town services programs, human resource practices, and decision-making processes, close quote. So right there, it's got more in it than just advise. It's a slightly grammatically challenged sentence, but I think you get the idea. So there are two problems. First, the role of the committee was not solely advisory. It was also to identify. Second, what were they supposed to do in order to fulfill that duty? During the discussion regarding the extending the committee's tenure at the February 24 meeting this year, Vera McNeil stated, without disagreement from any other board member, that the committee's plan to meet with the Windham County Sheriff was acceptable as outreach, was within the committee's charge. So it appears that the question is not whether outreach is impermissible, it's all about what might or might not have been said. And you have not allowed open discussion of that. You've received reports in secret of comments which may or may not have been said, allowed no response or rebuttal from the persons accused, and then announced your verdict. The committee has also been repeatedly criticized for not developing a charge. But the original proposal put before the board at its June 5, 2019 meeting included a charge. The board decided to pull the charge out of the language of the proposal, but never got back to the committee with any comments or suggestions on revisions. So from what I can tell from the board's public presentations, the problem is not what the committee did. The problem is how the board responded to the discomfort the committee's work may have generated for some people in town. Rather than allow the committee an opportunity to respond, the board took the allegations and ran with them. You have justified your actions with references to a letter from the town's attorney, but you've never produced a copy of that letter, despite having at least once said that you would. In sum, at a minimum, I believe that you have treated this committee unfairly and that you need to make amends. To start with, I believe, and I've requested this before, that you should formally rescind the February 24 statement. I know that Karen took that down off the website, but it's still up on the Brattleboro TV video of the board's meeting, and it remains there without rebuttal. I also believe that you should provide the committee with the advice you have gotten from the town's attorney on what the limitations of the committee's activities might be. I think that guidance would be essential, particularly now that you're looking for a way to go forward. Those are two steps that I believe would help rectify what I think has been, frankly, unfair treatment of this committee. And I urge you to take those steps. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a little bit at a loss for words, obviously. I think that you're taking an appropriate, very legalistic view of how things occurred, and I think that it doesn't take into account largely the emotional side of it, which may or may not be appropriate in this circumstance. But I think that certainly my reviewing of those discussions surrounding the resolution and appointment, I wouldn't characterize them the way you characterized them, but that's just a difference of opinion and perspective. And I obviously heard it from my perspective, because I was sitting there listening and participating in those conversations, and what I thought I heard is not how things unfolded. And again, I certainly take some credit for that not going the way it should have. But it didn't proceed the way I anticipated it proceeding. And I know this is not all about me, but I'm also pretty clear in my feeling that certain participants I mean, it's tricky because I don't want to be calling individuals out in a public setting, because I don't think that's appropriate. But I think that the intent of certain individuals on the committee was different than what they presented to me and to us in certain meetings. And and I've spoken specifically with Swift and Mark about this, that I think there was a loss of trust there. And I think we, the select board, David and I, currently the ones who were there for that, hold some responsibility for that loss of trust. But I think it squarely falls also on some of the committee members, and it's very limited to some of the committee members. It's not all of the committee members. And I don't want to get into personal discussions about that. And I think that what you're sort of pushing, Fletcher, is a reconciliation that for me would beg a need to discuss those things. And I don't feel the need to do that. I am looking to move forward. And I think I hear a larger picture in your statement of looking to move forward, but I also hear a lot of focus on the past, and I understand that's important because we've all been focused on that a lot. But I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I think certain aspects of how that committee functioned were really detrimental to how a committee should function and to the function of our municipal work. And so I don't want to go, and I've said this in open meeting before, I think specifically to you, Fletcher, I don't want to go further into this than I'm comfortable going further into it. And if that feels like I'm trying to cover something up, it's not. I'm trying to respect personal boundaries with people. And so without commenting any further on that, I'm willing to entertain the idea of rescinding the statement if the other select board members feel that's necessary and important. I think that I don't agree with you that there were aspects of open meeting law that were necessarily breached. Again, I have said before, and I'll say again, I think there are aspects that we could have managed better, and that we probably flirted with some things we perhaps shouldn't have. But I don't think that open meeting law was broken. And that would necessitate us rescinding that statement. I personally have not revisited that statement recently, and I guess I would have to before I would vote to rescind it. And I can't do that right in this moment, but we can revisit it next week. But I really would like for us to accept the fact that there were significant failures on a bunch of different parts of what happened over the last year and a half and move forward. And I feel, I understand you feel there was some injustice done and you want to correct that. And I understand that. And I have had personal conversations and apologized for certain aspects that I have felt were perhaps unjust in things that occurred, but I have also been unapologetic to those who I don't feel were acting in good faith necessarily, sorry, I've misstated that. We're acting in good faith, but their actions did not come across in good faith. And I I have spoken very clearly with people about that, and those are not conversations that I feel rise to a level that we should be talking specifics in a select board meeting. But I don't know where to go from there, Fletcher. I don't know what you want from me. I mean, well, I guess I do know. You want us to rescind that statement. And sorry, remind me what the second thing is. The second thing is to not recognize that it's not strictly advisory. Is that?
Well, I think one thing, a second thing, the specific thing I've asked is, you've repeatedly referenced guidance you received from the town's attorney.
Yes,
Make
we
it public so that the committee knows what it is and the town knows what it is. But
yeah.
Broader than that, and you said the presentation's legalistic, and you know, okay, then let's
you're
talk
a lawyer.
about
Yeah.
personal. That statement, did those people damage their reputation, their standing in the community has been diminished because of it, and they have gotten negative responses from community members because of it. And that entire statement was put together without the committee having an opportunity to respond. Now, you could say that's a legalistic position. It's due process. It's also just fairness. Why at any point in the process were they not invited? And even if you say it's appropriate for executive session, you can invite them to attend an executive session. Never once were they invited into the process before they got slammed at a public meeting. And that slamming still hangs out there. You need to do something about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I should like to ask Attorney Proctor a question. Are you currently representing the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee?
You've asked me that question before and I have answered it. The answer is the same.
Which is?
The same answer I gave you the last time you asked it.
Well, this is a public meeting under the Vermont Open Meeting Law. People may be in attendance now who did not hear you before. What is your answer?
I don't know. What do you recall my answer being?
Can I interrupt here?
Yeah.
I told you that I do not represent the Equity and Inclusion Committee. In fact, there's two reasons I couldn't. One, it doesn't exist anymore. And two, the Equity and Inclusion Committee could not hire an attorney on its own without the authority of the Select Board.
Thank you, Attorney Proctor. And actually, you have now brought up a point that I was going to make, which is, however we look at it, the Equity and Inclusion Committee, like every committee appointed by a Vermont Select Board, is accountable to the Select Board, subordinate to the Select Board. Now, in that regard, Mr. Chairman, it has been, Article 6 of the Vermont Constitution has been mentioned, but only in passing. And I think it's important that we consider what it actually says, quoting, that all power being originally inherent in and consequently derived from the people, therefore, all officers of government, whether legislative or executive, are their trustees and servants and at all times in a legal way accountable to them, unquote. Article 6 is cited as public policy by the Vermont Open Meeting Law and the Vermont Public Records Act. Now, regarding Article 6, here is what the Vermont Supreme Court said in Welch versus Seery, quote, Article 6 is but a truism of a Republican form of government and provides no private right of action. The remedy contemplated by it is that of popular election. In other words, officers of government are accountable to the people via popular election. Now, as grist for your mill, I think I should mention that, I should mention this. Your powers are limited by what is known as Dillon's rule, your powers as a select board. And I'm now quoting the Vermont Supreme Court in City of Montpelier versus Barnett. A municipality has only those powers and functions specifically authorized by the legislature, and any additional functions as may be incident, subordinate, or necessary to the exercise thereof. If any fair, reasonable, substantial doubt exists concerning a grant of power, it must be resolved against the municipality and its power denied, unquote. And I mention this now simply because it certainly is an important context to what you all are considering. I'm not stating a position for or against what you're considering because it actually hasn't come up yet. But I feel that this is something that has not come up that we need to keep in mind is whenever a committee is assigned to do something, the question needs to be asked, does the town of Putney, in fact, per the Vermont legislature, have the power to do it? Thank you.
If I could comment just briefly, your attorney advised you at the time you originally created the Equity and Inclusion Committee what your authority was. And again, this isn't about the accountability of elected officials, it's about the authority to delegate responsibilities. And Mr. Fairman is completely correct. You remain responsible. And I think your own comments earlier in this meeting, Josh, indicated a recognition of that. The committee is accountable to you and you are ultimately responsible for its actions. That's why communication between the committee and the board is so essential. In fact, one of the things that most troubles me about this is that when problems seem to come up and the select board was concerned about them, there was zero communication with the committee. That's the major failing here. Why didn't you just have them in and talk about it? Some of the allegations—
Because we didn't, Fletcher, I'm sorry. And I've apologized for that failure of leadership, and I'm sorry. I don't, I can say sorry again, but we didn't. And
some of the allegations that you have accepted and acted upon are denied by the committee members involved, yet they never got an opportunity to say that to you. It was simply accepted that whatever the allegations were correct. This is fundamentally unfair. This is why this—
I have said before, I'm sorry to interrupt, Fletcher, but you're sort of, I feel like you're flogging a dead horse. And I understand your desire to do that. And I don't want to prevent you from speaking in open meeting. But I have been very clear also.
I don't want to flog a dead horse. I precisely don't want to flog it. It's not dead. You need to put it to rest. You need to put it to rights. That's the problem. The thing that happened that caused the damage that I'm concerned about is still hanging out there. It isn't dead. That's the point.
Okay. Thank you. So we will discuss whether I have to revisit the statement. I'm not having read it in a while. I am not going to propose that we rescind it right in this moment, just based on your recommendation. I think that I need to revisit it. I know there were parts of it that didn't make the statement that we intend, or that made a statement that was intended in the moment, but perhaps was not the statement we truly wanted to make. And I have apologized to individuals for that. But I also, again, and I will repeat this, I have firsthand knowledge, Fletcher, that you don't have. I can't, I'm not going to share that with you. And I'm sorry for that, but that's all I have to say about it. As far as providing the information from our council as to what we were advised, I will make sure either Karen or I revisits that as soon as we possibly can with legal counsel and release any of it that's not privileged. I think there is one statement that clearly is not privileged, and then I think there were some other communications that were privileged. But I think that you're revisiting the original resolution and saying that to inform and advise, to me, inform and advise largely sound pretty similar in being pretty clear. I mean, I know they're different things, but the intent was for them to be advisory. They were going to inform us and advise us how to proceed. And
Except it doesn't say inform. It says identify.
Identify, sorry.
But the point being that there was more implied there than that they sit in a dark room contemplating their navel and then come talk to you. Clearly some outreach was not inappropriate.
Fletcher, I've recognized that this, I'm going to try and we're going to try and take some steps that are being done, but I feel like you're just beating up on us because you don't want to beat up on us. And I'm that's getting really frustrating for me in this moment. So I would like this communication. I would like us to continue. I have proposed that we, and I'm sorry, Fletcher, I'm really annoyed at how you seem to be wanting to bring this forward in a way that's could be done more productively, I think, and it's not feeling that way to me. And I'm sure you're feeling the same way on the opposite end of it, and that's unfortunate. But if we need to, you know, whatever we can do to move forward, that's what I'm trying to do right now. And we will provide you with the stuff that you have specifically requested, and we will also revisit the statement and see whether we choose to rescind it. But there's a whole lot of information you don't have, and you're making a bunch of assumptions, and that's really frustrating because we've been through this several times, and I don't want to keep doing it. So if we can move on, that would be great. I have proposed 3 people be appointed to a working group, and I believe there was a motion for that or not.
I can't remember.
I don't remember. We can do it again. I make a motion that we approve the 3 people that you identified to form a working group.
And I'll second that.
So that would be Swift Everty, Mark Thurman, and Eitan Nasreddin Longo. And
Mr.
I will
Chairman.
be the select board. Hang on a minute. I will be the select board liaison with them. So that's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? I heard Mr. Fairman say something and Swift wants to make a comment. Mr. Fairman?
Thank you. I support Attorney Proctor raising his concerns, which he is entitled to do under the Vermont open meeting law. Now, I realize that some of what he has said has discomfited you specifically because you have expressed your discomfort. However, you have run for election to be a select person, which means you have volunteered to be in the arena and to hear what Attorney Proctor has to say, whether or not it discomforts you. Or as President Harry Truman used to say, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen.
I agree. I also am entitled, Mr. Fairman, to make a statement about that. And I'm watching Fletcher, and I'm watching, honestly, a smirk passing on his face from time to time. And I'm sorry if I'm making statements that aren't appropriate. It irritates the heck out of me that it feels very personal, and I don't want it to be personal. So I'm trying to
ask you to not assign any motive or thoughts to my simple facial expressions. You have much in the same respect that I perhaps am not privy to your knowledge. You have no idea. And I would ask you not to attribute things to me.
Okay. So, and I ask the same of you, Fletcher, and I have both of my select board members with their hands up. Eileen, go ahead.
I hear Mr. Fairman's point that this is open meeting and people are entitled to whatever they need to say. But there is a point at which a conversation is no longer constructive, and I think we've reached that point probably 15 minutes ago. And I personally would like to move forward with the motion that we originally identified and move forward with this committee instead of rehashing the past. That's my recommendation.
Thank you. David?
And I have a statement that I sat in those rooms with Josh doing this, I was a brand new select board member, completely out of my depth, and I abstained from the first vote on this because I didn't know enough about what this committee would do, and I had concerns about what this committee would do and the staffing of this committee, and it was my understanding that it was just advisory, or I would not have voted for it. It's that simple. That was my understanding of it too. So if you have a different understanding, you have a different understanding, Brock Fletcher. But
I wasn't even on the board, so I have nothing to say to this.
okay, that was our understanding of it. And we went forward with it with the best intent that it would come back and advise us on what we might consider or do, and not necessarily do outreach without talking to us. And the communication failed in both directions, not just one. It was clearly failed in both directions. And the way that I feel I failed was that to not make it really clear to the representative from the select board to the committee of what they were supposed to do and come back. I thought the understanding was there that they were going to come back to us after their first few meetings. And not only that, but if I remember correctly, the minutes weren't even posted on time so we could understand what was happening in those meetings. That wasn't our failure. That was their failure. And there are a lot of other things, like Josh is saying, that you are not privy to, and it feels to me like you are making assumptions. And this is getting really old. And that's what I have to say.
Swift, you wanted to make a comment.
I was just commenting just on the formation of the subcommittee or the working group, is that what we're calling a working group, of just that those will be open to the public. I'm definitely getting a lot of feedback from community members that they're wanting to be at those meetings, and what I know you, Josh, have talked about more like observers versus participants, or that there will be minutes and that they will be open. Just clarifying that.
Well, they will be subject to open meeting law. If there is a committee appointed, then it's subject to open meeting law. Right. So it's been moved and seconded to approve Swift Everty, Mark Thurman, and Eitan Nasreddin Longo to a working group for the purpose of creating a charge going forward for equity and inclusion. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
You and your colleagues referred to this, quote, working group, unquote, being subject to the Vermont open meeting law. The Vermont open meeting law defines public body. Public bodies are subject to the Vermont open meeting law. Working group, I believe, is not among the possibilities that are mentioned. So you may wish to reconsider your nomenclature to make them subject to the Vermont open meeting law, as they in fact should be.
Okay, I will explore that and see what it needs to be. But I think I've heard Swift say, and I would agree, that we will make these discussions open meetings. I do, however, have to say that the purpose of this is to create a charge, and part of the reason for having a small group is to be able to be focused and to take specific steps towards getting things done. So, you know, how much we will engage the public in that, I think we'll find out as it proceeds, I guess, whether people want to participate, and if so, how. But go ahead, Eileen.
I actually don't remember. I was just going to say that we can specify right off the bat that that can be the charge of the committee. They don't have to be subject necessarily to open meeting law, and they could still publish minutes and be open. I don't see that as being a roadblock.
Good. All right. So it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, hang on, something just came.
I think there's something, yeah, the chat.
Yeah, Michelle is speaking about what Dan DeWalt talked about earlier being attending a circle with members of the EIC, and I don't know. That's a conversation that the select board would have to have. I'm not sure.
Robin wants to speak after we vote.
Yeah. All right.
I just want to say one more thing, just that from my memory, that was one of the recommendations from our training together, the Equity and Inclusion Committee and the Select Board, of suggesting having some sort of mediation or something in the future. Was something that I remembered was a recommendation from Dottie and Mary. Just putting that out there again.
Yeah. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, so next, town manager's report. Oh, actually, sorry, Robin wanted to say something. Robin, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I don't know if this is an appropriate suggestion even, or the appropriate time to make it. But I did have an idea for something on which the Equity and Inclusion Committee could possibly work going forward, sort of a change of direction. And again, I offer this just for consideration. President Biden, as you know, has loosened our immigration policy, and our governor, who I note in passing is a Republican, has sent a letter to the national government requesting that Vermont be given special consideration in receiving people through an expanded immigration policy. And I wonder if in turn it would be something that would be useful in general and or appropriate for the Equity and Inclusion Committee to pursue writing a letter in turn to our state government indicating that Putney would be particularly interested in hosting new immigrants. We have a long history of wide cultural diversity in this community and welcoming it. I think that that's something that we could build on, and that this committee might perhaps be usefully central to, and perhaps also in looking at what particulars would make receiving new members of our community welcome and feel that they were integrated into the community. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. I know I've spoken before about that perhaps being an opportunity related to affordable housing too. And I don't know, I don't think we pursued that with Putney Landing, but it might be, I know Peter Padgey was here earlier. You know, it might be worth having that conversation also with, because one of the big hurdles in Putney right now in particular, but in general, is affordable housing. Any housing. Yeah, exactly. But it might be worth having that conversation with Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust also at some point to sort of see where it goes, whether they can facilitate that in any way. All right, town manager report, Karen.
I'll make it quick. Town Hall, the barn roof has been completed. I had sent a couple pictures, so it looks really
Cool.
nice. Now it needs to be painted because the roof looks so good.
That's what I said. I said I was joking though.
No, I agree with you on that, Eileen.
Did you volunteer to paint it, Eileen? Is that what I heard?
I've got 2 kids, they can do it.
There you go. They did discover some shingles, like some wood shingles on one side of the roof. So they had to scrape that off. So the quote will be a little bit higher than what we had anticipated. But the roof is complete. I'll be meeting with Wade Mashur. He's the passive representative on April 28th at 10 o'clock. We'll be doing a walk through the buildings for safety. And he does this occasionally. And if there's a list of things that might have to be fixed, and that stops us from getting certain grants if we're not in compliance with safety. So like the front steps, Josh, I know he's going to say something about those because I'm still waiting for Paul. I haven't heard anything, but you know, wastewater treatment plant had some things that needed to be done, and you know, town hall had a couple. And I remember the list when Chip was here because I had to complete, you know, some of the things, but I will keep the board in the know when after I meet with Wade. The pool. So as of today, we have approximately $60,453 in donations.
Thank you, people, everybody who's donated. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I want to thank Alyssa Harlow, and she did quite a bit of work. She researched some pool companies. We had the original person that fiberglassed the shell. He was at the pool today. He met with Joe and he looked at it. So he's going to give us a quote. Another contractor reached out to her, and there's plaster that can be put into the shell as well. So I don't know what that entails until we talk to him further, but it's not like gunite, but I don't know what it is. So he's going to be looking at the pool as well. So we'll be getting a few bids to see where we're going to end up. And it's possible that one of these contractors might be able to get in this year. So I'm trying to be optimistic. And I know David and Ray have looked at it as well to patch it. So, and one of these contractors may look at it and just fix what's damaged. And that might be all we need. So until we get a contractor in there to really look at it and get back to us, I'm thinking we may have several options. In your packet too, I had sent you a resolution to establish a special fund for these donations. It was originally on this agenda, but I had taken it off because I wasn't sure I could get it completed in time. So the May 5th meeting, I will have that in front of the board.
Okay.
And in your packet also, I gave you a summary report of delinquent tax. And the outstanding amount as of 4/17 is $114,647.54. And I know more delinquent taxes have come in, so this has gone down a little bit lower. I want to say this is a really good place to be, given the circumstances with COVID and people not being able to work. So I'm happy about this. I've seen it a lot worse. So, and we are still working on collecting monies. I also gave you a copy of the tax sale list. As of today, we're at $53,494. We're still pursuing more collections, so I expect that number to go down. And in probably another month, we'll have an official list. So this list will change. And let's see, everything else, I think, can wait. Other than the Putney Historical Society lease, we should sit down and work on that, Josh.
Yes, I spoke with Lisa Papazian briefly the other day
Yeah.
and told her we would be revisiting it shortly. So
I think the timing is good too. With stimulus money and federal money coming down, like with the American Rescue Plan, the town of Putney will be getting money, and there's more money out there for like broadband, but planning is going to be critical, and I think this money can be a part of that, you know, for feasibility studies, whether it be housing, water, the water treatment plant, you know, upgrades or whatever. But, and I agree with Howard that I think it should be a community engagement to perhaps see where the need is, you know, to disperse money. I also read too that what they're trying to do is to not have towns look at actual material things like, you know, heat pumps or, you know, whatever, you know, like things that you can just buy that should be like maybe in the capital plan, you know. So they want long-term, like planning, something that you can implement, and it would be, you know, for the benefit of the whole. So we'll have to look at that and start thinking about how we want to approach that.
sounds good.
And one other thing, I will be out of the office tomorrow and Friday.
Okay.
So,
And Alyssa will be in the office?
yeah, Alyssa will be in, and Jonathan and Kim are all in tomorrow. And then Alyssa will be working from home on Friday because
Okay.
John and Kim do not work on Fridays.
Right.
So
So there will be nobody in the office on Friday, but
that
Alyssa
is
will.
correct.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Karen. Yes, Mr. Fairman.
returning to Town Manager Ashley's comments on the pool. Of course, it's a wonderful idea to get opinions from various pool contractors, but at the end, we're probably going to be left with this one recommends this and that one recommends that. How do we decide? And seeing that Architect Bannister is still with us, I'm wondering whether I don't know whether he personally practices in the area of pools, but it is possible that he knows of someone, alternatively, who could give, for a nominal professional fee, advice on the various proposals from the pool contractors as to their pros and cons.
You may or may not have seen him shake his head when you said.
That's what you get for staying on the meeting.
But he might be able to. When, what's that?
Unwilling to jump into the deep end.
Yeah. Why don't we wait until we get that information back and see whether what sort of we need to analyze? I mean, we may get some people say I can't do it by my method, and others say I can by mine, and then we decide from there. But David,
Having put in that worked for Tri-State Pool for some summers, I can't imagine that the opinions are going to be all that different. If they're professionals and they make a living doing it, there's really only one way to do it right, and chances are good. If someone recommends that we do a job to just repair what is done, it will be sold as just a repair. And if there's anything that needs to be done right now, I'm sure they're going to address it. So that's just to reassure you, Howard. And we're not going to move forward with anything that is, isn't the right thing to do, especially with donated money.
Mr. Babbitt, to clarify, I was not in any way impugning the Select Board's motives in this regard.
I didn't think you were.
But regarding your mentioning that there's just one way to do it, in this meeting this evening, two ways to do it have been mentioned. one involving, I think it was cement, and the other one involving gunite. And I believe there was a third mention, there was a third alternative mentioned before, which was repairing the fiberglass with fiberglass. So given that several alternatives have already been mentioned by presumably equally qualified pool contractors, that's why I raised the question of having some independent consultant, so to speak, have a look at the proposals and tell you their pros and cons.
And that would be a wonderful idea. And I was just trying to reassure you that we would do that, and that that the people that were going to recommend whatever they were going to recommend, I'm sure was going to be good. And having looked at the pool myself, I have a pretty good idea of what they will probably recommend. And I've seen all different styles of coating the inside of a pool.
By the way, I think I should mention, as we are in the public arena, I am not a person who ever needs reassurance.
Okay. That's a good thing to know. I'll keep that in mind.
I also, it may well be that the almighty dollar governs this decision more tightly than we might like it to, but you know, depending on what we're presented with for options and costs involved, that may be a large factor. So, all right, is there any other business?
Yeah, I've been hanging around to discuss the possibility of creating an agriculture advisory committee.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you sent that information for us. And just, for those who haven't seen it, Pip, can you just, it has shown up previously in the town plan, but we've never done it. Is that, am I recalling that correctly?
Yes, I hate to reveal our lack of follow through in a public meeting, but there was an implementation schedule associated with the last town plan. And in it were recommendations for actions to be taken by Select Board, Planning Commission, and Conservation Commission. And we haven't, as boards, met together to go over those recommendations. Recently, when the town plan, we've been reviewing it with the new Planning Commission members in anticipation of the revision. When I came across the implementation plan, I was surprised that it's so explicit and that we have failed to do it. But agricultural issues, I think, are going to come to the surface in this rewrite of the town plan. It'd be very helpful to have an advisory committee. So, you know, if you take a look at the implementation portion of the town plan, I sent you a link to it, and then I think I actually sent you the actual pages because I found a Word version. Among the 10 or so activities there, one is to consider forming an agricultural advisory committee, and the steps would be to prepare a candidate list, make appointments, develop committee goals and responsibilities, and then meet as required to provide recommendations to town officials about sustaining and promoting local agriculture. From my point of view as Planning Commission Chair, this would be a benefit in writing the town plan, and then ultimately in perhaps having a regulatory response, which would be to include agricultural lands in a zoning overlay district with regulations that would take effect if development were proposed on those specific lands. So that's a sort of zoning concept about how to approach minimizing the impact to valued resources in a community. And you can apply it to lands with rare or endangered species, or forest lands, or whatever the resource is. In this case, the resource may be agricultural land. It's a model that's been used in other communities, like our neighbor Westminster has an agricultural overlay district and a set of zoning responses that are required by the applicant to make sure that they are aware of the value of the land and doing what they can with the proposed development to minimize impact. So with that as a goal in mind, it would be very helpful to have a committee of familiar with agricultural use and with agricultural lands in the town of Putney to advise the planning commission. The other responsibilities, are not clear to me, but it's quite possible that there would be other value to an agricultural advisory committee to the select board. So step one would be deciding that, yeah, it's a good idea, and then coming up with a candidate list. I'll throw it back to you guys.
Certainly sounds like a good idea to me. Might or might not be hard to recruit people for it. I don't have a clear sense. I can imagine a number of people who I could imagine we could invite, but I don't know whether they would be interested or not.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would say I strongly support what Mr. Bannister has suggested, because there is actually plenty of activity, plenty of agriculture in Putney. We tend not to pay attention to it here in the village, but in the village we have a working farm run by a young couple who I note by walking by there regularly seem to be employing a number of methods of earning a living by being farmers. But beyond that, up on River Road, according to the U.S. Soil Conservation Service, is some of the finest farmland in the entire country. And this applies all along to the alluvial land all along the Connecticut River. Now that, of course, is a precious resource that should be protected from development for other purposes, because once prime agricultural land is gone, it's gone. No more is being made.
That's true. And some of those lands are protected by virtue of a variety of other things, but certainly local input on that would be important. Eileen.
Yeah, I fully support the idea of an agricultural committee. Having run our own farm in the past, I would question whether we would be able to find people who felt that they had the time to do the business of farming and also be on a committee. So I mean, I'm perfectly willing to explore the possibility that we could find people. I just, especially this time of year, well, any time of year, depending on what you're doing, it may be hard to find people, and it may be hard to keep them on, and they may not be all able to meet at the same time.
Degree of urgency, Pip. I mean, given that we haven't implemented it yet, and it's been several years, that's not a reason not to do it. But is there a specific deadline we should be looking at, or what would you propose?
We're planning for the expiration of the town plan in 2023 and need to begin to set the process in motion. But some of these, the overlay district concept is complex and requires establishing some criteria to be able to define the resource, in this case agricultural activity, and then be able to come up with a thoughtful set of regulations that do their best to minimize the impact of development on that resource. That's going to take a while. I don't think it needs to happen this summer, so the farmers can stay busy this summer. But just developing that concept and running it by people in town that may be willing to respond to the criteria for evaluating land that needs to be protected. Mr. Fairman's notion of using the ag soil as a criteria is certainly one that's important. I think that it was a shortcoming Josh, you may remember the LISA evaluation program that was promoted by the state.
Yeah.
And so Putney was among the few towns that sort of started and then decided that there were possible inequities because one of the primary criteria for that, I think, was ag soil. And so a farm would receive a higher score on this evaluation form if it showed, a significant acreage of prime ag soils. So that criticism, the concerns about the inequity associated with that evaluation system led Putney to stop its participation in LISA. Sort of anecdotally, the LISA evaluation data is the data for Westminster's agricultural overlay district. So they proceeded right ahead. They have mapping that shows those areas that they would like to have been identified as a resource, and then a set of zoning regulations to try to reduce the impact of development on that resource. If that's the best way, fine. We have a neighboring community that chose to follow through. Putney chose not to do the LISA process, and because of that, we don't have that data or that ranking of the farm activity in Putney. So whatever, I guess I'm being distracted a little bit to suggest that there are sort of layers of significance and decision making here. It's not simply as pointing it out, but those are the nuances that I think those people in that agricultural field in Putney could help the Planning Commission understand a little bit better. What are the best criteria to define this resource? And then once we've moved past, we could look at some of the regulatory responses from other communities and have them vetted by that same committee. Does this make sense? Do you think this would be helpful? So that's how I imagine one of the roles of the committee would be and the goals of the Planning Commission.
All right. I guess I would say maybe what we should do is sort of lightly query some of the ag-related folks in town as to their willingness, and maybe we can all sort of take that on as individuals for the moment, but try and lean on Karen to maybe keep a list of people that we might speak to. The other thing I wonder, Pip, and I don't know whether you've already explored this, is what the other local and or regional and or state level expertise that could help us figure this out. I mean, the Department of Ag clearly keeps track of a lot of this stuff. Whether Wyndham Regional has done any work in this realm or not, I don't know. But sort of how to bring, we hate to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to, and what's available to us. But maybe starting with talking to some of the farmers who might be willing.
Yeah, that's the first thing on the list. Prepare candidate list. So yeah, if you're willing to do it, that's great. So, we're committing to seeing if we can get an agricultural advisory committee together. Step one is get some candidates and we'll talk to them.
Sounds good.
A question just really quickly. This current town plan was written what year? The one that's about to be updated in 23? It was
adopted in 2015.
2015. And during that time, did we have a candidate list at any point? And did we try to create a committee like this? We never have. Okay, all right. And that's all. My only question. I just want to say I'm strongly in support of this. I think it's a great idea. I think protecting the agriculture in this community, in any community, is really important. So I'll start asking people that I know. Having grown up working at Green Mountain Orchards, agriculture is near and dear to my heart. So.
Can we ask Karen to be the list keeper so we can send recommendations her way?
Are you okay with that, Karen?
Sure.
And then I think the next step is once we do have a list, we just send out a generic information, contact through whatever email or mail, and just tell them what's going on and that they, if they're interested, please follow up. And it'll probably get called very quickly at that point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would suggest that in the spirit of how Vermont towns are run, that this be an open invitation to people in the community, because someone may come forward whom you have not thought of. And I would further add in that regard, at your previous meeting, you stated that no one has the right to be appointed to a town committee. And while this is true, everyone has the right to be considered should they wish to come forward. So in that regard, you never know who will come up that you didn't happen to think of. Now, further in this regard, when Mr. Bannister proposed that such a committee be established, you, the members of our select board, all said, well, how can we get people to serve on it? Because there will be this reason and that reason they won't serve. Now, what I'm going to say to you is, are you listening to yourselves? You haven't even tried, you hadn't even tried to recruit a committee yet, and yet you were saying why you thought you wouldn't be able to recruit a committee. You've got it upside down. Try before you say you failed.
Eileen.
I have tried to recruit people almost every single meeting. Plus, I've put stuff out on Putney. I have tried to recruit people for lots of boards. I'm not saying that we won't get people. I'm just concerned that we won't get people. That's all I was saying.
And all I was saying, and I don't think, Mr. Fairman, I'm sure you're not asking for us to defend ourselves, so I know we don't need to. But it's a group of people that are very busy. Just sort of respecting that. But that does not mean they won't step up. I absolutely agree with you. I think I'm sure it's a topic that a lot of people are interested in. It's whether we can find folks who have the time and energy. So, but yes, we shouldn't start with shooting ourselves in the foot. So we'll take that under advisement. But I also think reaching out, putting it out as a public statement of some sort. So we'll figure out how to approach that. All right. Is there any?
Josh, you have a comment in the chat from Vanessa?
Vanessa, problem, of course, those who are most familiar with ag land and use are the same ones working 24/7 on those land. We'll probably need to enlarge the scope to wider environmental interest knowledge, which would go along with Mr. Fairman's point of if we put it out to a wider group, then we might find others interested. So, all right, is there any other business? Okay. I just want to take a moment to apologize to everybody on the call for engaging in a poor display of meeting behavior, and I apologize specifically to Fletcher. I got dragged into the personal end of things, and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made assumptions, but I was feeling a little cornered. So, even though it's hot in the kitchen, I think I can stand the heat for the time being, Mr. Fairman, hopefully, but time will tell. But again, sorry to everybody for display of unprofessional behavior. Do we have a need for an executive session?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would simply say I have no doubt that you can stand the heat in the kitchen. I simply pointed out that it comes with the territory.
No question, and I'm aware, and I've actually pointed that out, particularly with work on equity and inclusion, that we may not have known we signed up for this in the last round of coming forward, but we did sign up to be in the center of public discussions. And by having done that, we certainly commit ourselves to trying to do our best. And it's not always easy. So.
Well, moreover, Mr. Chairman, people speak about democracy all the time. Democracy is dissent. If we have consensus, we don't need democracy.
Yeah, that would be convenient, but I don't think very realistic, unfortunately.
Precisely.
All right, so if we don't have need for an executive session, our next meeting date is May 5th. That would be 2 weeks from tonight at 5:30, same place, same time. And Karen was saying earlier that maybe sometime before too long, we might actually start to look for a large space such as the fire department where we might start to be able to meet in person again. So I know I would look forward to that, but for the time being, here we are in our separate screens, and thank you all for participating, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night.